Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Sadasiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Bande Guru Paramparam Shankaram Shankaracharyam Kesavam Badarayanam Sutravashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha. Good. I can feel the mumblings through Zoom. It's wonderful. Okay. Last week, I think we did a lot of the karikas right up to mantra 12. So, what does anybody recall? Anything at all from last week which was of significance or which they thought was quite interesting?
I really appreciated the breaking down of the Om with the A or M, and I really meditated on each one separately. And it was amazing because it just opened up my thinking, I think. I found it difficult to come back to just the Om after I'd meditated on each one separately. But I did find that really interesting.
Okay, good. Well done for that. Anybody else on any of the other things? No.
I had a question on Karika 19.
Right.
Which is about the relating of R with Vishva, considering the similarity of primacy. And I would have thought in the order of things, primacy and all-pervadingness would have been more Prajna Ishvara rather than Vishva and Virat.
Primacy here just means the starting point. So the number one category, when we look at ourselves from an experiential point of view, the point at which we start is the waking state, because that's where we do all of our thinking. So that is regarded the start, just as the letter A is the first letter of the alphabet, and has a major consequence on all of the other letters. So it is really the starting point more than anything else, more than the completeness or anything like that. That's what it meant by that, by primacy.
Yeah.
Because in an experiential world, you have to start from the waking state. That's the one state we do know pretty well. Dream state, dodgy, all right. And causal state, no clue. So we have to start from somewhere. Good. Okay. At least meant that the notes were read, which I'm quite impressed by. I read my notes a number of times to figure out, what did I say again? Okay. If there's nothing else, I mean, you understand that the breakdown of Om was basically in order to find a mechanism for focusing on the Turiya, the state, the fourth state of Atma that was in the first part of the Upanishad. It's a question of, yes, I understand that intellectually. How do I come to realize that? And you have to come to realize that through Nididhyasanam. And Nididhyasanam, it takes something that you've understood intellectually, and then you absorb it into the rest of your self, so that it becomes part of your emotional self as well as your intellectual self. And for those of you who are studying Bhagavad Gita and things like this with me, you'll understand that we now have a certain number of crossovers between these two. I have more crossovers than most of you because I'm studying Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 and chapter 11 simultaneously with two groups. And sometimes it all just merges because the ideas are one and the same. Okay.
Quick question, Ram.
Yes.
So on meditate, upasana, and the spiritual benefit, and the sakama and nishkama benefits, and when you meditate, I mean, for me, using the Om for meditation, but splitting that up, the silence for me is the easy bit. But because there's a lot of words associated with each letter in terms of how they explain it, I think for me, I don't know about others, but kind of I would like to know if we could go through that at some point, how we use those words in the meditation. Yep. So it relates to what they're saying in here.
Okay, let's try and do that, and let's try and give an example of that maybe in our final meditation tonight. But you're absolutely right. Om, as you start off and you intellectually understand that you're not starting with A, you're starting with O, because A and U comes together as Om. The first realization of the material world is relatively easy, but that's because we're in the waking state. Trying to think of the dream state is impossible while we're in the waking state, let alone the causal state. But then the causal state starts to become a little bit easier because you realize that it's starting to disappear into the unmanifest. So you're already looking forward to the end of the M in Om. And then the silence happens, and it's almost like, oh, thank goodness for that. This is the one state I can really relate to. So I understand exactly what this relates to. So yeah, it's not an easy thing to meditate upon, and it's actually not recommended for new meditators, as I think I've said before.
Ram, can I ask, is the point of this that the previous three states resolve into Turiam?
Yes.
And when they're resolved, they're just gone. And then the silence is all that's left, the Brahman state.
Yes, so the idea is basically that you come to understand that all the three other states are apparent states. And in fact, Turiam is not the fourth state, but is the only state in which the other three apparently appear. Right? They arrive and then they depart, but Turiam remains constant. So it's an easy way to explain that Turiam, and it means the fourth, is actually the fourth state of this four quarters, but in fact it is not a separate state. It's something dissociated from the three because it contains the three, and because it's Advaitam. That's the other thing that came up last week, which nobody's brought up. Because it's Advaitam means that only one, it represents Brahman, Turiam Brahman, in the Nirguna state. So since it is the only one, therefore the other three states cannot be Advaita, right? They must exist in a different order of reality to Turiam. They must be Mithya. And Turiam is the only one that's Satyam. Not an easy thing to get. So it's taken years for some of you to be with me to figure that out. It's taken me longer, so it's okay. All right. Does that answer your question? Sorry, did somebody else start a question?
Sorry,
Janet.
just to pick up on what you said. What does nirguna?
So nirguna means without attributes.
Okay.
So it is a version, it is Brahman in the truest form, Advaita form, without attributes. Mm-hmm. The problem with Nirguna Brahman is that if you have something that's infinite and has no attributes, is limitless, has no edge, has no border, has no states, is not capable of creating anything. So how can you say that from Brahman comes this entire world, and therefore we don't, right? We need a representative to be the creator, and that representative is Ishvara. So Ishvara, then, the concept of Ishvara, the closest translation to God, all right, is then created, which is then Saguna Brahman. Saguna means with properties. Now Ishvara has the ability to think, to make things. And how does it make things? It makes things with this miraculous power called Maya that allows you to build up any model you like, but it actually doesn't exist, but transactionally you can work with it. So it works in a transactional world. So Ishvara is able to manipulate Maya. Since we say that Ishvara is all there is, then Maya provides the material aspect of the world. That material aspect must also be part of Ishvara. So Ishvara is both the intelligence angle, and because of this total intelligence, is able to manipulate all this matter apparently to create this world in an apparent manner. So Brahman, Nirguna Brahman, Saguna Brahman is Ishvara. All right. And sometimes they don't differentiate, they just call it Saguna Brahman, Nirguna Brahman. So with properties or without properties.
Thank you.
Right.
So Ram, is in a sense when we talk of the four quarters, really we're just counting in Maya, but there is only one.
There's only one.
You look at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
It's just the counting is Maya, and if you stop Maya and stop counting, there is only one.
Yes, but we live in a waking world with a waking mind, and this is where our intellect resides. The intellect is the only mechanism we can come to understand this. So we have to put it in a form that the intellect can understand, because we're trying to come to know something that is unknowable.
Yeah, that's what I understood, which is probably why it made sense to me to think of the counting as Maya.
Yeah, all of this can be said to be the power of Maya Shakti. That as you know, the two aspects. It covers up what is the underlying reality, and on top of that projects something completely new, very believable, all right, very tangible, very useful, but mithya. Okay, good. So as you know, I'm because a lot of questions come up in Advaita Vedanta, I'm having a Q&A night on Thursday, December the 9th at 8 o'clock. There's a public Zoom channel. Anybody can come in, pitch their own question. I'll see how it goes, whether there's any takers, whether it needs to be repeated again. You can even ask a question out of context. I may not know the answer, but you can ask a question out of context. Okay, let's get back to tonight. Right. We've only got one mantra to go. Mantra number 12, the final mantra of the Mandukya Upanishad, not the final mantra of the Mandukya Karika, which is what we are studying, but the final mantra of the Upanishad itself. Mantra 12 translates as this. Turiya is the silence which is beyond transactions, free from the world, auspicious and non-dual. This Omkara is the very Atma. One who knows thus enters the Atma by himself. Okay. So now the Upanishad comes to the silence. Having done A, U, and it comes to the silence. This is the fourth component of Omkara, which is the same as the fourth quarter of Atma. And the fourth quarter of Atma was, of course, Turiya. The silence that we experience is the Turiya, which is beyond all transactions. Silence, as we know, can't be handled by any of our organs of action or organs of knowledge. Neither can silence be handled by physical, mental, or verbal means. The moment you describe silence, the silence is gone. It is in silence in which the world of all forms of sound are resolved. Turiya is the substratum wherein all the objects of the world have resolved. Silence is Turiya. That's the equation, which is Ananda, total bliss. Languages are different, but silence is always one. In silence and Turiya, division, plurality, they're simply not present. Therefore, both silence and Turiya are Advaitam, only one, not two. In this manner, Omkara and Atma are equal in all the four levels. Now, when we talk about the equation of silence with Turiya, the word silence has a special meaning, a special connotation. It's not the conventional silence because it has a special meaning. Conventional silence is what? Conventional silence is the absence of sound. And this should not be taken as Turiya for two reasons. The first reason is that conventional silence is taken to mean a mere absence of sound, and therefore it's a negative entity. Absence can never be a positive entity. If this negative description is applied to Turiya, one will end up with the Buddhist view of Sunyavada. The ultimate truth is just emptiness. Right? Vedanta doesn't say that. It's not just emptiness. It's not a negative thing. It's a positive thing. The second reason is that conventional silence is only experienced when the sound has disappeared. At the arrival of sound, the silence goes away, and vice versa. Conventional silence is a relative entity, subject to arrival and departure. Comparison with conventional silence will make Turiya a relative entity. Thus, amatra, which is the Sanskrit name given here for the silence, should not be taken as a relative silence. When you experience silence externally, it is the absence of sound. And when thoughts and disturbances are absent in the mind, you experience internal silence as blankness. When you experience internal silence and there is an internal blankness, the question to ask, is there only blankness? Internally, no thoughts. Is there only blankness that's present? Other than blankness, is there something else? And the answer would be yes. There must be something because of which I'm aware of the blankness. If there was only blankness, how would I know it was there? There must also be something that is aware of the blankness. If the silence is experienced and known by me, it means that there is a knowing consciousness principle that pervades that silence. That knowing principle I can't see, hear, I can't objectify, because that consciousness principle, I am. and it pervades and illumines the silence, thereby making it available to me. The meaning of silence is the consciousness principle that reveals the silence. And that consciousness is what's called amatra, A-M-A-T-R-A. Coming to a chat box near you. Silence is equal to the consciousness principle that reveals the absence of sound. It is not absent in itself, but reveals the absence. Very subtle point. It is that which reveals the absence is amatra. There's a beautiful example. Those of you who did chapter 1 of Panchadashi and are still alive to tell the tale will recall that Vidyaranya gave the example of stage lamps that reveal the play on the stage, and also the empty stage after the play's over. A non-dancing lamp continues to be on the stage, illuminating the absence of all the actors and dancers after the play is over. The mind is the stage. The thoughts are the dancers. When the thoughts are gone, you say that the mind is blank. But the blankness is revealed by the consciousness principle. That consciousness principle is not subject to arrival and departure, but is the absolute silence. It illumines the relative sound and the relative silence. That consciousness principle is Turiya. Whoever understands that, he is Turiya all the time, this mantra says, and merges into Turiyam Atma as one with the Turiyam Atma. This is a total merger. Right? How do we get total merger? Example, it's like water merging into water. It's not like salt merging into water. We are not separate. We don't dissolve into Turiyam Atma. We're already Turiyam Atma. We just merge into Turiyam Atma. That merging is not a physical process. It's a cognitive process where we come to understand that we were always that. This is moksha. This is liberation. Understanding that is self-realization. So with this moksha benefit, Omkara Vichara, inquiry into the sound of Om, is over, and the Mandukya Upanishad is also completed. Hurrah! But Gaudapada has not finished his commentary. Oh. And he has Karika 24 for us. Doesn't the guy sleep? No. Karika 24. One should know Omkara in terms of the quarters of the Atma. The 4 quarters are the 4 letters. There is no doubt. Having known Omkara in terms of the 4 quarters, one should not think of anything else. So he's obviously going to reiterate, especially what he's read in Mantra 12. Before we get into that, are there questions on Mantra 12? Did anybody not follow what was said about Mantra 12 and the nature of silence? Remember, there'll be a test. The Upanishad has concluded the Omkara Vichara with the 12th mantra, in which Amatra, the silence, was talked about as identical with the fourth quarter of Atma, namely Turiam. Omkara followed by silence is not just the mere absence of sound, as we said, but the consciousness that pervades and reveals the silence. This consciousness is indicated by the silence of Omkara. You see, when you chant Om and you get to the end and you're an interchant gap, the silence, that silence is an indicator of the consciousness principle that is revealing it. And this must be understood as the Turiam that was described in the 7th mantra. That Turiam is the substratum for Vishwa, Taijasa, Prajna at the level of the individual, and also the substratum, the basis on which everything stands, for Virat, Hiranyagarbha, and even Ishvara at the cosmic level, the total level. For all these three pairs, Turiam is the substratum. That Turiam is the silence, which is the consciousness principle. Thus, we have to equate the 4 mantras of Omkara with the 4 quarters of Atma. The Upanishad says that whoever does this fourfold equation, solves this fourfold equation, becomes the Atma, the Turiam. Right? I say becomes because we were never not that, but they come to realize that they are. And with this benefit, the Upanishad is completed. From the 24th Karika, Gaudapada concludes Omkara Vichara, highlighting the Turiam mantra. He focuses on using Omkara for Nitidhyasanam. As you may recall, meditation can be seen to play a part at 2 distinct levels. Prior to knowledge, meditation is there for the clarification of the mind, the purification of the mind. At that point, it is called upasana. Quieten the mind, prepare the mind for knowledge. Once the knowledge has subsequently flowed in, now that knowledge must be imbibed from just an intellectual knowledge, and all knowledge is intellectual. Even experiential knowledge is intellectual, but you need to make it your own. And you do that through contemplation. That contemplation on aspects of the knowledge is called Nitidhyasanam. And therefore, silence meditation has to be possible at both upasana level and at Nitidhyasanam level. And because I thought there may be a question on something like this, in the text, I've just drawn out a little box, just a few words on silence meditation that I'll read out to you now. Omkara can be used as a support for Nitidhyasanam. How do you meditate using this? You chant Om, and when you come to the silence, you have to dwell upon the knowledge that there are 2 components in that silence. One is silence itself, and the other is the consciousness principle. Then turn your attention from silence to consciousness and claim that you are that Turiam, consciousness. This is what silence meditation means. How can it be done practically? All sorts of mantras may be used for upasana and nityasanam. One of my great teachers, Pujya Swami Dayananda ji, used to say, when you repeat a mantra, any mantra, say Om Namo Narayana. Many people use a longer mantra simply because you are forced to remember the words. Om is such a short one that you often drift off. All right. But if you've got a phrase to recall, then you stay more focused on the words. When you chant Om Namo Narayana, you think of your chosen deity. This is at the upasana level. And surrender to the Lord. We discussed a great deal in Bhagavad Gita chapter 11 about the meaning of surrender, where you take your free will and channel it towards a dharmic response. And because dharma is from Bhagavan, your free will is now God's will. Changing your karma to karma yoga in accordance with dharma is the surrender to the Lord. That's what surrender to the Lord means. There you focus on the mantra. This is the upasana in which you give emphasis on the sound of the mantra. When you use the very same mantra for nityasanam, after completing Mandukya Upanishad, tick, you chant the mantra initially and then focus on the silence between two chantings of the mantra. You gradually come from the mantra to the silence. Thereafter, you expand the silence between the two chantings of the mantra. You don't expand it physically in time, you expand it in your mind to be greater than the mantra. Thus, from mantra, you come to the silence, and from the silence, you come to consciousness. From consciousness, you come to Turiam. The same mantra can be used for upasana and nityasanam. Here, we're using Om. In this meditation, one comes to silence awareness. I'm never affected by silence, you can say. I'm never affected by sound. May I abide in Turiam. Just a few guidelines. Let's carry on with Karika 24. Omkara must be seen as identical with Atma. Having seen the general equation, the individual equation of the mantras and the quarters should be clearly understood, says Gaudapada. While practicing the Omkara Nityasanam, one should utter the Omkara and therefore lapse into silence. From sound, you come to silence, and from the silence, you come to the consciousness principle. This consciousness is not the reflected consciousness. Remember, we talked about original consciousness and reflected consciousness. Reflected consciousness is a personal consciousness that's reflected from the reflective medium of the mind or the body. We give names such as Visva and Taijasa to reflected consciousness. This consciousness principle in silence is not reflected consciousness, which is only when you're associating the first three mantras and the quarters. That's reflected consciousness. But once you're dissociated from the first three mantras, the consciousness that is referred to is the original Chit, original consciousness, Chaitanyam, shortened to Chit, which is always there. Therefore, Therefore, sound to silence, silence to chit, chit to turiam, as the substratum for all. If you do not go to turiam, you'll think that the consciousness is multiple in nature and confined to the different bodies. You'll think that Vishwa, Taijasa, Prajna, they are individual consciousnesses. Right? You should always meditate upon consciousness as singular, all-pervading, limitless, edgeless, eternal, etc., etc. Every word of the seventh mantra can be meditated upon. Remember, the seventh mantra went to all these examples that you are Advaitam, you have an equanimity status, you are the nature of Shiva. All of these, there were a number of explanations in the seventh mantra. It was a core mantra in the Upanishads, the nature of Turiam. So you can meditate upon each of those as I. Consciousness should not be viewed as an object, but I am that consciousness. Not I am focused on consciousness as an object. I am the consciousness that's currently meditating. So you're trying to focus on the subject rather than the object. And of course, while doing so, one mustn't get distracted. With Om meditation, it's very easy to get distracted. Karika 25. One should fix the mind on Omkara. Omkara is fearless Brahman. For one who is ever established in Omkara, there is no fear anywhere. So Gaudapada says that we should practice Omkara meditation regularly because Omkara is Brahman. The sound part of Omkara represents Saguna Brahman, Brahman with properties. And the silence part is Nirguna Brahman, Brahman without properties. Brahman is the only source of security. Why is Brahman the only source of security? Because it is unchanging, right? It is not transient. If you feel insecure, then attaching yourself to something that is transitory, that itself is insecure, as I said in another class, insecurity plus insecurity is not security. It's more insecurity. It's insecurity doubled. Brahman is the only unchanging thing. It is your only source of security. Anything else you hold on to will either be Viswa or Taijasa, right? Which are bound by time, which means that they have no security at all. Time will affect everything, but will not teach Turiam Brahman. For the person who's ever presiding, now here's a new word, in the pranava. Gaudapada being Gaudapada, he gets tired of uttering the word Omkara all the time. So he changes the word. He introduces it in this Karika and then replaces Omkara with this later on. Pranava means perfect name, right? Pranava, perfect name, Om. Om is a perfect name, right? Who is ever remembering the knowledge of Om, even through the most provoking transaction in life, such a person does not feel any insecurity in any place, at any time, or in any situation. Why? because Brahman is completeness. It is fullness. If you equate yourself to Brahman, then you have no sense of lack. If you have no sense of lack, you're not insecure in any measure at any time at all, because you have everything. It's only when we do not have something that we have fear regarding that topic. And if we've acquired something, then our fear may be about losing it. But if you come to the realization you are all there is all of the time, then where does fear come? So not forgetting this knowledge is abiding in Brahman, and fear is samsara. Fear leads to samsara, the ups and downs of life, all driven by fear, from a sense of lack, which is driven by ignorance. Fearlessness is moksha. Karika 26. Indeed, Omkara is the lower Brahman, and Omkara is known to be the higher Brahman also. Interesting. Omkara is the lower Brahman, and Omkara is known to be the higher Brahman also. Omkara is without cause, without effect, without inside, without outside, and without decay. The Upanishad uses the word Omkara, but Gaudapada also started the discussion with Omkara in the 24th Karika, but from here he replaces the word, as I said, Omkara is replaced with Pranava. This word is not used in the Mandukya Upanishad at all, in the 12 verses, but used in other Upanishads as a synonym for Omkara. So Pranava is a synonym for Omkara, and the meaning is perfect name, ideal name, suitable name. For Brahman or God, the ideal name is Omkara. That's what Gaudapada wants to say. The other Upanishads say it. That is why Omkara is called Pranava. God is one, Om is one syllable. Perfect. Perfect name for God. Now we just have to figure out who God is. Brahman is Saguna and Nirguna. Omkara is also Saguna and Nirguna. Brahman without properties, with properties. Omkara is also with properties, without properties. The sound part of Omkara is Saguna, and the silent part of Omkara is Nirguna. In all respects, Omkara and Brahman are identical. Thus, Om is the ideal name, Pranava, for Brahman. Omkara represents Saguna Brahman. The silence part represents Nirguna Brahman, which is without a cause, without an effect, without any second thing internally or externally. So Omkara can be used for Saguna or Nirguna Brahman. You can use Omkara, therefore, Saguna Brahman is Ishvara, the creator, or you can use it as Nirguna Brahman, the totality, Advaita. Flexible word, that, Om. Karika 27. Omkara is indeed the beginning, the middle, and the end of all. Having known Omkara thus, one certainly attains that immediately. What does he attain? That which is beginning, middle, and the end of all, i.e. everything. So This Nirguna Omkara is without cause and effect. Brahman is without cause and effect. Why? Cause and effect requires a change of state. If you've only got one state and you're infinite, then it's without cause and effect. But when Maya is associated with Nirguna Brahman, it's called Saguna Brahman. So Nirguna Brahman, Brahman without properties, plus Maya equals Saguna Brahman, Brahman with properties. Brahman with properties becomes the cause. What is the effect? The world, everything. Once we accept Maya, this is a problem. I'll ask the question. If we accept Maya, don't we have duality? We have Nirguna Brahman plus Maya equals Ishvara, Saguna Brahman, right? But I thought Brahman without properties is everything that there is. Why do we need to add Maya to it? Why do we need a second thing onto Brahman? Haven't we just created duality? Remember, Advaitam means absolute reality without a second. Brahman is the only absolute reality. And when Maya is accommodated, it is not accommodated as absolute reality. It's accommodated as an empirical, transactional, Bhavaharika, Satyam reality. Maya cannot be counted as a second. So even with Maya, Brahman continues to be Advaitam. Even with the addition of Maya, Brahman continues to be Advaitam because we know what Maya is. Due to the association with Maya, Brahman becomes the cause of the creation, cause of the sustenance, cause of dissolution of everything. Remember, most Upanishads talk about Ishvara as being the cause and the world is the effect. Thus, the meditation should be, I am that Nirguna consciousness. I myself become Ishvara when associated with the Maya principle. As Ishvara, I alone am the cause of the creation, sustenance, and dissolution. This is a difficult step to take. It's all very well studying that Advaita, there's only one, right? That ultimate reality, which is the basis of everything, including the basis of me. The real I is Brahman. It's relatively easy to follow as an intellectual exercise and on Ram's notes. Then when you have to turn that around and in meditation say to yourself, I am that Nirguna consciousness. If I'm that Nirguna consciousness, I myself become Ishvara when associated with the Maya principle. And as Ishvara, I alone am the cause of creation, sustenance, dissolution. That means I don't live in the world of objects and thoughts. The world of objects and thoughts come out of me. That is the difficult switch to make. With Maya Shakti, I create the world, the waking universe. And with Nidra Shakti, the Shakti of sleep, I create the dream universe. Understanding the pranava, remember Om, in this manner, a person attains that Brahman. Omkara, as that Brahman, one attains immediately. Knowing Omkara, one knows that one is Brahman. How does the dreamer know the waker? Only on waking. He knows the waker by realizing that he is the waker. Right? Just in the same way, one wakes up as the waker. One comes to know through Omkara immediately that I am that Brahman, Nirguna Brahman, which once I accommodate the Maya principle, I become Ishvara, and through Ishvara, I create the world, sustain it, and it dissolves back into me. That's what the meditation should bring out into you. As parts of the teaching that you're going to meditate upon. Karika 27. One should know Omkara to be indeed the Lord who is present in the hearts of all. Having known Omkara, which is all-pervading, a discriminative person does not grieve. The silent part of Omkara is Brahman. That Brahman resides in the heart, is said in this verse, heart, which means the mind. Cave of the heart is often used as a euphemism for the mind of everyone witnessing the presence and absence of thoughts. The non-arriving and non-departing consciousness that witnesses the arrival and departure of all thoughts in the mind is Turiya Brahman. Remember, as we said before, witness consciousness does not mean consciousness is witnessing. Don't use it as a verb. It's consciousness in the presence of which something is known. Is the way that you should be translating witness consciousness. Shakshi Chaitanyam can't be translated in any other English words. Now, saying that Brahman is in the heart presents a problem. Can anybody see the problem? Brahman is infinite. How come he can reside in my heart, which is the size of my fist? That would make Brahman finite. So what does he mean here? The Karika says that Brahman is in the heart of everyone, and heart is taken to be the mind because it is considered to be almost the center of the body. But he says, and everywhere else also. Should be read as Brahman is in the heart of everyone and everywhere else also. It is present as the witness consciousness in the minds of all. Knowing Brahman as myself is the knowledge of liberation. Self-realization. Total understanding. Moksha. Now, people generally say that they have knowledge and understanding, but they don't have the realization. Ram, I've gone to lots of your classes. I totally understand. I get what you're saying, but I don't get the realization. That means you're not able to accept the knowledge as realization. You understand Atma, Brahman, Turiyam. You understand what all of these things mean. But you can't yet come to say to yourself, I am Brahman. That final stage hasn't happened. Whether one accepts knowledge as realization or not will depend upon your qualifications. I don't mean degrees or ologies, right? No biology or physiology. No ologies will help you here. Qualification is the state of your mind. How prepared are you for the knowledge? If you're not prepared, you're not qualified, the knowledge will not have its profound effect. That's why pre-qualification before the knowledge is mandatory. Karma yoga, upasana, jnana yoga, moksha. Easy path. Go from karma to karma yoga, all right? That will tell you the importance of upasana to prepare the mind. Once the mind is prepared, jnana yoga from the latter part of the Vedas go in. Ta-da! Moksha is the result. Very well-trodden path. Millions of people have gone through right to the end of the cycle. So can each of you. The person who understands that this knowledge is liberating knowledge has no more grief in life. As I said, the problems of samsara goes away. Because the Vedas make a grand statement. They say the Vedas are the only mechanism for the elimination of sorrow. Not one of the many mechanisms. It says it is the only mechanism for the elimination of sorrow. Karika 27. Omkara is without sound and with infinite sounds. It is the ground of dissolution of duality. It is auspicious. A sage is one by whom Omkara is known, not any other person. So when you come to know Omkara for what it truly is, you become a sage. What in Sanskrit is called a muni. You become a muni. So Karikas 24 to 29 that we've been studying here, we haven't reached the end yet, are commentary on the 12th mantra of the Upanishad, which deals with amatra, the silence. In this Karika, Gaudapada specifically comments on amatra and concludes. Amatra is the silence. Sorry, I don't mean this Karika 27. I mean that this is the last Karika, is Karika 29. I mislabeled them in my notes. Therefore, the last one was 28. That's what cut and paste does for you. The last Karika that we have to study. Omkara is without sound and with infinite sounds. It is the ground of dissolution of duality. It is auspicious. A sage is one by whom Omkara is known, not any other person. So as I started to say, Karikas 24 to 29 are commentary on the 12th mantra that deals with amatra, the silence of Omkara. And here we're going to know a little bit more about amatra. Amatra is the silence at the end of the Omkara, which is nothing but the consciousness principle. It is without any limit for its boundary. Now, for a sound, there is a spatial and time-wise boundary. But for silence, there's no such boundary. Silence is infinite in its measurement. It is the ultimate reality where all the dualities are absent, i.e. Vishwa Virat, Taijasa, Hiranyagarbha, Prajna or Ishvara. These pairs are resolved in Turiam. It's said to be Mangalam, a word I haven't used before, although it's actually come up. Mangalam means the nature of bliss, Many people use it to say that they're about to perform a task that is Mangalam. It's a good thing to do, the nature of bliss. Whoever knows Omkara completely, he or she alone is the real Muni, the real sage. Not necessarily the ones who may give the outward signs of being a sage. You have to truly understand Omkara. And with this, the 29th Karika and Gaudapada's commentary on the Mandukya Upanishad is over. The rest of the Karikas that Gaudapada did write is further analysis of the teaching and is found in chapters 2, 3, and 4 that we are not going to study. Because the whole thing, rather than being called the Mandukya Upanishad, is often known as the Mandukya Karikas, with the 12 mantras plus all the Karikas from Gaudapada. And in some texts, the analysis of the mantras and the Karikas by Gaudapada's student's student, Adi Shankara. That text is also available. Depends on how much do you want to study. Right. So both the mantras and the Karikas are now completed. You have reached the end, for some of you, the end of your first Upanishad. You can give yourself a pat on the back. Right? For some of you, it's the fourth or the fifth Upanishad with me. And you can also give yourself a pat on the back, because it's been just as hard for you as well. Questions on that? I know it's my voice that puts most people to sleep or in a deep daze. It takes a long time to come out normally.
Hi, Ram.
Lorraine, did you want to say something?
I did. Oh, sorry, Julia, you go.
Thanks, I will. Yeah, you said before that Maya, we know what Maya is.
Yes.
Can you remind me, please? I may have forgotten. And how come it is there when there's only Brahman?
Maya is, do you remember the 17 elephant story? Right. Maya is that which is required to solve the problem, but does not participate in the solution. Right. And if you studied chemistry, you know that nitrogen and hydrogen mixed together creates ammonia, but only in the presence of platinum. But the platinum does not take part as being a catalyst in the equation. That platinum is Maya. It's required for the solution, but it does not participate in the solution itself. Maya has two properties. One is that it covers so that you cannot see what it actually is covered, so that it is no longer visible. And on the second property is on that something else is projected, something that it is not. And the classic example of the power of Maya is the rope and the snake. It is through the power of Maya that you cannot see it for a rope. And on that rope, you've projected something that it is not, a snake. So in that same way, we see the world here. The underlying nature of the world, Satyam, is Brahman only. That's all there is. We don't see Brahman. That's hidden from us through Maya Shakti, the power of Maya. And on that Brahman is projected the world. Just as we can look at a rope and say, what is the color of the snake's eyes? We look upon the world and transact with it as if it's all real, but it's an apparent reality. Right? It's another order of reality to the ultimate reality. It's like dealing with a reflection rather than the original face.
Okay. I'm thinking, because there's only one thing, and that's Brahman. How can Maya, I mean, it's not a tangible thing, but it's, how can it be present?
It's not tangible, but Maya Shakti must also be a part of Brahman. Right? Creative power, maintenance power, dissolution must also be Brahman, because Brahman is everything. If you take the intelligence part of Brahman and add the Maya part of Brahman, right, then you get the creation of the world. Brahman doesn't do it. The intelligent aspect and the one who manipulates Maya is Ishvara.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore Maya is said to be the material world, which itself is the body of Ishvara, while Ishvara is the mind. So this intelligence cause and the material cause together provides this apparent world. And so we had the example last week that after self-realization, what happens when you realize that there's only Brahman, there's only Turyam, what happens to the world? Does the world disappear? Right. And we said that no, there's two ways that a pot can disappear. Either you can smash up the pot so the pot is no more, which would mean on self-realization, suddenly, we just end up in nothingness. All right? Everything just goes. What would often be called, nirvikalpa samadhi. You have no appreciation of anything. You cannot even experience anything because there is no separation between an experience and the experiencer in nirvikalpa samadhi. So it either can be the total destruction of the pot, that will make the pot go away. Or secondly, you could say the pot never was. It never had its own underlying reality. Therefore, to say, would the pot disappear, is a wrong question. Was the pot there at all before I came to know that it's only clay? Right. So we have this notion of what is called a transactional reality, an empirical reality that we transact with. We put water into pots and things like that. It becomes useful. We eat off wooden tables and put clothes into wooden wardrobes. We have a transactional reality, but at the same time, there's a paramatmika satyam. There's an absolute reality of Brahman being not two. All right. And because we have to explain, no philosophy is worth its while unless it can explain the world in which we live, my real life and experiences. In order for that explanation to happen, we must have the idea of creation. If we're going to have because we are surrounded by stuff, right? If we're surrounded by stuff that we didn't make, it had to have been made by something or someone. It's logical, right? And we're provided it. I didn't produce a single blade of grass that's on the lawn outside. It was all given to me. Even at a personal level, I didn't create this body, right? I didn't give myself 2 lungs, but only 1 heart. It was all given to me. If you go to the ultimate conclusion of all these things are given, this empirical world is, then you have to ask yourself, is there a giver? To solve the problem of all of this thing being available, you have to say that there must be a giver. And therefore, Advaita Vedanta says there is a giver. It's called Ishvara. Right? And Ishvara is the intelligent and the material cause, because these are the two things that you need in anything that is given. The stuff with which it's made and the intelligence with which it was made. That's what we're surrounded with. If we're surrounded with all of that, then you get the ultimate conclusion on that. If we're surrounded by all of that, then all of that must be Ishvara. So everything that you see is Ishvara. Suddenly you get to the second understanding of God, which is all there is Ishvara. The first understanding is, I'm a poor devotee and God is ultimately powerful, so Ishvara, I will pray to you, may I get a better Mercedes next time. Right? That's the first stage of God. The second stage is you come to realize that all of this around us must be the glory of God, must be the body and the intelligence of God. Then Advaita comes around and gives you the shocking news that this God you are. Because if there's only one, then you can't possibly be separate from this God. All right. Yeah. And by that stage, most people haven't got there, or they've been burnt at the stake, or other things like that. It's a 3 stages that you come to, and it's the most difficult stage of all. The easiest is to say, no, God, whatever I do happens, collect as many toys as you can before you die. You're the only important thing. It's the Margaret Thatcher view of life. There's no such thing as society, right? And then you gradually say, well, actually, I've got a very difficult exam tomorrow, or that job next week, I could really do with it. Right? I don't know of anybody else to ask. Right? My child is ill. I don't know of anybody else to ask who has the power to help. I'm going to pray. Who shall I pray to? And you have a personal God that you pray to. And what you're praying to is that universal power that you see all around you, but which is manifested in a physical form so that you can focus on it for the purposes of prayer. And that's the first stage of divinity. The second stage is understanding is not just one thing, it must be all things. Right? Because the world is made out of stuff, and you end up by asking, well, if God is the creator, where did he get the material to do the stuff? Is the material separate from God? Was the material before God came along? By making the material separate from God, I've made my infinite, all-powerful God into a finite and less powerful God. The only conclusion you can come to is that God is both the creator and the material. And you get to the second stage. And it's all around you. So it's not just one God. It's not just many gods all around you. All right. Then Advaita comes around and says, Advaitam, there's only God. And that God is you. That's the most difficult bit to get. Not to understand, intellectually understand the words, but to turn it around. Aham Brahmasmi. I am that Brahman. I am that Brahman which together with Maya is the creator of the world.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thank you. And thanks, Lorraine, for your patience.
Well, I think Ram's just answered my question, but I don't understand it in that last bit. Was that Karika 26? That is the bit that I completely can't get I understood it up to there, but then as usual, like you think, oh, I'm actually starting to get bits of this. And then Ram throws another curveball in and says, oh, actually, you're the creator of that. I just can't get it.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is a difficult stage. This is a difficult stage to get because, we're said that Brahman is all there is. Advaita Vedanta says one underlying reality. If there is one underlying reality, the underlying reality of me must also be Brahman. If there's only one underlying reality, I can't be outside of that. Because the moment that I consider myself outside of that, I've not only made myself finite, I've made Brahman finite. If Brahman is finite, how can it be only one underlying reality? The one underlying reality must be infinite. That infinity must include me. That Brahman must also be me. The real I. The one because of which things are known. That Brahman. There's only one of it. Therefore, it must also be the basis of me. You look as if you've been hit with something, Lorraine.
I'm just trying to digest. Yeah, I think that bit I understand. I think I can get that bit. It's the bit after that, but maybe
So
it's
if that Brahman is me,
yeah,
all right, then we know that from Brahman, sort of, if you take Nirguna Brahman and add the aspect of Maya, you get Saguna Brahman, that's otherwise known as Ishvara. So if the underlying nature of me is Brahman, once I add, and there's only one, that means that the aspect of Maya is also within me because Maya must be within Brahman. If I bring out that Maya aspect, then I get Nirguna Brahman, Brahman without properties, and Maya makes Saguna Brahman, otherwise known as Ishvara. So Ishvara must also be a part of me. If Brahman is the stuff from which I am made, is the fundamental reality of me, then from me I can get to Ishvara with Maya Shakti. If I can get to Ishvara, and then Ishvara creates the world, then who created the world? I did.
okay.
It's that final turning it around, not really saying, I know what Saguna Nirguna means, I know what Atma means, I know what Brahman means. Is turning it around and saying to yourself and believing it, right? I am that Brahman. That Brahman is also me. It's because when we use the word I, we mean the little I, we mean the egoic I, right? And if you went to someone and said, I am that one underlying reality, I am the true I am God, then they'll lock you up because they think the I that you're talking about is the little I, but you're trying to talk about the great I.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what takes the nididhyasanam.
Okay.
To dwell upon that, to say, if Brahman is all there is, and it's infinite, there is no space for anything else. And therefore that Brahman must also be the underlying reality of me, as it is the underlying reality of everything else that I see.
Thank you.
But the everything else that I see is of my own doing. I know. Sorry, Maggie, are you speaking to us? Because your microphone's off.
Do I remember you talking about the concept of upadi here? That's when you were talking about Brahman without properties and then Ishvara with the properties. Was there something about upadi in there that you talked about?
The upadi is in the context when something is associated or close by something else, then its properties are often pushed upon something else. So yes, because Brahman is in the presence of what seems to be the ego, the mind, right? It takes the properties of Brahman, the absolute nature, and that association, it makes us believe that the little I is the real I. Because of that close association. Brahman is not tainted by that notion, but it makes us come to that conclusion. All right. It's very easy to come to that, to give the properties of something close by to something that has no properties. Brahman has no properties, but we tend to put properties onto Brahman by saying it's consciousness or blue or whatever, or it's me or anything like that. So upadi does come into it, but it only generates more questions. I know we're going to have a fun time on this December Thursday 9th or whatever it is, when these questions come up. Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, please.
Yes, Patricia.
I wonder, why isn't that intellectual knowledge wouldn't be enough? If I understand something really well, is there a need to meditate on it? And secondly, nididhyasana may be sounding a little bit like self-hypnosis or placebo effect. Not that there's something wrong with it, but is it? Or how do I know it is not? How do I know that I know? Or just I think that I know? Any pointers how to, I don't know, navigate through that?
All very good questions. It's all very well to know the true nature of your underlying self, right? And be quite clear about that. You have no doubts that this is your complete understanding. But how do you live it? How do you live it in your daily life? Vedanta is there for the elimination of suffering, right? Now, by knowing it intellectually, would you eliminate suffering? And the answer is no. Because when something happens in your life, you'll react to it. And how will you react to it? In the way that you've always reacted, emotionally, right? But if that reaction, that automatic reaction in most instances, when things happen to us, we don't go into a deep down analysis in our intellect to figure out what our response should be. We respond most of the time from an emotional response, sometimes on a knee-jerk response. All right. When that response is based on the wisdom of what I've been taught, then I start to live the knowledge. And that can only happen when I've taken it from the intellect and placed it into my emotional level. So that when I react to things, I react from the knowledge, all right, instinctively, so that I can live it. So when the situation happens, it doesn't derail me, because I know what is changeless and what is changeful. And when it's changeless, I've learned how to accept. When it's changeful, I figure out how with the best of my faculties, how can I make a difference? That's living. That's a creative living. As I said to somebody, I think on an email, the difference between reactive and creative, put these words down on a piece of paper and see for yourself. The difference between reactive and creative is the position of the sea. Right? We live in a reactive environment in the world. We want to live in a creative environment in the world because we have the power to be able to create new solutions. Only is the position of the sea, is how you see a different perspective from a different position. Take reactive, put the C 3 letters forward in the front, and you become creative. Now you can see things from a different angle. And this has to be automatic. For it to be automatic, the mind can't get involved. It has to be at an emotional level. That's what Nityasanam is for. So that you can live what you know. Does that answer your question? Thank you. That's the reason for this. It's just this Q&A. That's the reason for a live teacher. This is what it takes. It's little, you pick away at little things until the knowledge becomes that much more certain. And if you have a question, you can bet your bottom dollar that other people have a very similar question. Right? If we go on any further, we won't live Janet's dream of ending this thing with a meditation. Maggie, we have to leave you, but since you're going into meditation anyway, so that's okay, that's fine. Diana's also gone. So shall we just have a short meditation, a very short one, just to calm down the mind? We're not going to do the full Omkara meditation. You can practice with that yourself. And before we go, because after the meditation, we're just simply going to have our prayers. I just want to say we're going to carry on with Mandukya because I need to give you a summary. We've done it at a detailed mantra by mantra, often word by word level. We need to take a higher level view. And so we'll go through a summary, maybe 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, whatever it takes. Also compile your questions, right? And we're going to nail this down before Christmas. Good. Okay. So I shall turn off my video and we'll have a short meditation to close, which I will bring to a close with simply 3 shantis, and then we'll have the closing prayer. So assume a position that you're comfortable in. Either sat on the ground, sat on a chair, or something else. Try and keep your spine straight without undue effort. And gently breathe as you relax. Don't control your breath. Let the breath breathe you. You're trying to settle the physical body. The body that you have in your waking state. Through which you transact in the world. With every outward breath, relax a little more. If you need to, work down from the top of your head down your body, relaxing the major muscle groups. And on every exhalation, let go a little bit more. Now you can notice the breath. You can feel the effect of the breathing. The coolness of inhalation on the nostrils. The warmth of exhalation. Physical things. You may be able to pick up a heartbeat somewhere. Drill down on it, focus on it. The physical body. It's known to you. The body doesn't know you, but you know the body. You can detect the changes in the body. The changes come and go, but you are constant. The breathing itself is the life force. That connects the physical body with the mind. Which generates the thoughts. And analyzes them. You are the one who knows the thoughts. The thoughts do not know you. The thoughts come and go. But you, the knower, are constant. this same acknowledgement of the breath, acknowledgement of thoughts, can be done in a dream. The dream thoughts would not know you either, but you would know the dream. The waker you, the dreamer you, are not two separate you. It's the same underlying you that knows both. That also knows the total blankness of deep sleep. The you is the same in all cases. It's independent of your experience. Permeates in and through all experiences. That you, Atma, Turyam, is all there is. That Turyam is you. The ultimate you. Om Shanti. 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 Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishtate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you very much, everyone.